when we came back to the city with our proposal, we proposed a massive amount of parks, trails, and open space. So Tech Ridge, not including Dixie Tech, but everything surrounding it's about 180 acres, and 60 acres of that is parks, trails, and open space.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to the 435 podcast. I'm Robert Macfarlane, your host. Today, I had the pleasure of meeting with the visionary behind Tech Ridge, one of the most amazing developments in Southern Utah, Isaac Barlow. We talked about his history, the creation of his first business, or maybe not his first business, but his most successful one up to this point, Busy. We talked about Tech Ridge and the economic impacts, the high density and the uniqueness of this project in comparison to other projects. We hope you enjoy this episode and learn a lot about this 180 acres that's going up at the old airport in Southern Utah. Enjoy the episode. Make sure you hit like or subscribe. There's a contest going on in this episode to name one of the amenities. I'll leave the cliffhanger here. You got to listen in, but we're gonna have a contest to name one of the amenities for Tech Ridge. So jump into the comments. Let us know what you want to name it. And other than that, hope you guys have a great week. We'll see you next week. Enjoy. Did you start in tech or did you start in construction?
Started in construction.
Okay. So kind of walk me through, how did you get to Busy from?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah.
Well, I grew up northern Utah.
Uh-huh.
So, and did construction up there. The reason that matters is because it's cold. It used to be really cold. It's getting cold again, but for about 20 years, it wasn't so bad.
Yeah, right?
But anyway, I grew up in northern Utah. Kind of my nature, I thought I'd be an electrical engineer, but end up in the family business of excavation, just how things go.
Yeah.
And that's excavation and land development. So my older brothers did the good thing that all older brothers should do. They started me off, throwing me in the trenches. And so I just started out like literally in the trenches.
Yeah, do the work.
Yeah. Do the work. Did tons of things in the excavation world, even things I'm not very proud of, like repairing live sewer lines and stuff like that.
Oof.
Yeah. And I'm a hygienic freak too.
Yeah, you like to stay clean. Got it.
So that was all interesting. But anyway, and working through the winters in Salt Lake City, it's not as bad as other cities. There's colder cities, but it can get pretty damn cold up there too. So
yeah.
So it motivated me to move south. And so how I got down to St. George is I was working up Salt Lake, and I'm like, I just got to do something different than this. I got to be in warmer climate, because winters were such a bugger to work through, and they're usually kind of economic depression in areas like that because you just can't get the work done as fast, and you still can't charge as much for it. So
right.
Anyway, in 2003, I took a job in Page, Arizona.
Okay.
Which was great. It was fun. It was fun because it was like they were 2 decades behind what we were doing. So we were kind of introducing all the new stuff to them.
Oh, cool.
Then 2004, I went to Lake Havasu in Bullhead City, Arizona. And I was 28 at that time and I just had my first experience with massive legal fighting because, just learned there are contractors out there that their whole goal is to screw over the subcontractors so they can make money that way, legally. And so got my best education in legal fighting in Bullhead City and Lake Havasu City.
Oh man.
End up great. I had a great mentor, and what I'd advocate for everybody is mentorship is the way to win. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Mentorship's the way to win.
Yeah.
Had a great mentor, contact him. I was 28, he's in his 50s, and he told me how to handle it, and I ended up winning.
Nice.
But it was enough of a fight that I was like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah.
And so the same guy.
So you were the subcontractor at the time?
I was a subcontractor doing excavation. Mm-hmm. Same guy asked him, just like, hey, I'm never going to work again for someone I have a bad feeling about. Because I had a bad feeling about these guys ahead of time, but I needed the work, and so I took it, which is common to most every contractor.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he says, well, let me introduce you to Darcy Stewart in St. George, because he knew I was trying to get to warmer climate. And typically we avoided St. George because it was like, you can't make any money in St. George because everything goes for so low. That was what was traditionally the case.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting to know Darcy and, met him in 2005 and then, been friends ever since. So today we're really good friends. But that's what got me to start doing business in St. George.
So did you work on some of Sun River, or were you doing
a lot of it?
A lot of it? Okay.
Yeah. Sun River. I'm very familiar with Sun River.
Yeah.
Did all the initial stuff, estimating and so forth. And anyway, driving home one day, 2007, I just had kind of this vision because I've always kind of worked around the construction industry, and I'm analytical by nature, so I'm always kind of studying and thinking about better ways to do things and how there should be better practices.
Yeah.
And on the way home one time, I had what I'd call like a vision. This was just prior to the Great Recession in 2008, so I had like a vision of like because I'm always like, how can I make the construction industry better? How can I make it more efficient? How can I make it function better? Like it felt like we had organized chaos. Like we got things done.
Yeah.
That's why I call it organized, but it was like way chaotic on
walking through mud a little bit and sometimes, right? Where you're like, why is it so difficult to do something so simple?
That's right. Even all the business processes, the data collection, everything, everything was just like pulling teeth. And so on the way home one time, I had a vision of just like how I'm going to change the whole construction industry. And it came to me so fast, like that's why I call it vision. It just felt like it was inspiration where I pulled over the side of the road and I was writing down as fast as I could. Like, here's all the things that I got to do,
Yeah.
That was kind of the inception of Busy. And I was like, well, that's a huge project.
Do you know how many times I've had like an idea and I was like, I should really write this down, and I never write it down? So many times.
Yeah.
You got to, when you have those,
pull over.
when you get that spark of inspiration, pull over, write it down.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson.
I had, back then the day planners, I just wrote all my ideas down in the day planner.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was like, well, I'm never gonna have time to do this, right? And then we hit the Great Recession and I got in literally the worst financial condition of my life because we had built up, a few $1 million in assets and things and just lost them all during the recession. And so I got to my most desperate point in reality, like my most desperate economic point in 2009 after 2008 just kind of annihilated me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this is like literally when Busy was launched. I was literally just praying. Like we got to the point where, first we're deciding like, are we paying our credit cards, or are we paying our mortgage payments? Like we let the credit cards go. It's like, then we get to the point where it's like, are we paying our mortgage payment or are we buying food? And so you let the mortgage payment go. And it's just getting more desperate, right?
Yeah.
And I, one day I was just praying my heart out. Like when you're in the construction world, when you're in a physical job, if you're home during the day, it's depressing because you need to be out making money, you need to be out doing something.
Yeah.
And so it makes you feel even worse. Like if you're home, you're feeling terrible. So I'm feeling terrible. Like, how am I going to provide for my family? How are my kids going to eat? All this stuff. And so I knelt down and prayed. And I'm just like, Father, how what am I going to do? How am I going to feed my family? And the distinct kind of impression I got back was, well, you haven't done anything with what I gave you. And my mind pointed to that day, like in 2007. I was like, but that's a big job.
It seems like a big project.
Seems like a big project. So Busy was kind of launched in my worst economic times, which gave me the perfect perspective because the whole point of Busy is to help contractors become more profitable. So from that, the next year or so, I ended up working with UX designer and just like getting all the ideas out of my head into a wireframe situation where we could comprehend what we're doing. And then during that time, in fact, the UX designer worked for
UX designer.
User experience
designer. So that would be like a software. Somebody to say if you're going to put this digitally, the user is going to want it to flow this way.
That's right, like a flow chart. So this is a person that takes, if you have ideas in your head, like, oh, it needs to do this and this. This is someone that kind of maps out the flow chart and says, okay, this is what it needs to do.
Okay, cool.
So this UX designer had actually gone to, Dixie Tech at the time, but Utah Tech University today, and he was a student of Dr. Eric Pedersen, who's now a good friend also. Oh, cool. So he introduced me to Dr. Pedersen because I had zero idea of what to do in the technology world. Zero. The best I knew is I had friends that had like a CS degree. I'm like, okay, I need to find somebody with a CS degree.
Yeah.
So anyway, this UX designer introduced me to Dr. Pedersen, and this was in 2010, and I asked him to consult me on the project, which he graciously did.
Yeah.
Huge. I couldn't say enough good about Eric Pedersen. Like he's kind of grandfathered almost every technology company in Southern Utah.
That's just awesome.
Amazing. But anyway, I got to know Eric and asked him to consult the project, and we got it far enough that in December of 2010, he introduced me to a company that at the time could do both back-end programming, which is like the database and the web programming, and mobile technology, which in 2010, mobile technology was barely emerging.
Right, barely. We didn't have a whole lot of cloud. Yeah. There wasn't a whole lot of cloud storage built up yet to be able to, because you're either storing it on the device or you have to store it in the cloud, and depending on how much data you're crunching.
Well, the whole mobile, like the smartphones, like the iPhone had just barely come out in 2009. So developers were, finding a developer that's even familiar with it was really tough.
Yeah.
So Eric guided me there, and then we started. That was basically the coding launch of Busy was December 2010.
Cool.
And so we introduced, I got introduced to them, and then later, as we continued to grow and I raised capital to fund the business, we continued to grow, and we ended up kind of absorbing that team into our company.
Nice.
For Busy. Cool.
And so then you launch the product. How are you selling it? Were you just calling contractors and
that was the beginning. Like initially we launched, it took us a few years to get all the coding in place we had to. So we launched the first beta version of the project in 2014. I mean,
the crazy thing, and not to cut you off, I always cut you off, but I'm sorry. But so thinking 2010, right? 2010 to 2014.
Yep.
From like crunching numbers and then getting the coding, where I was listening to a podcast the other day where this company was going through their tech stack and seeing which tools they were using. They specifically said Slack, and within 3 months, they using AI, they launched and have produced their own Slack like software from end to end, from start to finish, a completely fresh new product, their own product that is basically Slack in 3 months.
Oh yeah.
It's
by the way,
crazy.
2024 is 1,000 times different than 2010 when we started.
Yeah, it's just crazy.
Like you have more out of the box tools, things you can move way faster on a technology idea.
It's really wild to see, like, somebody who was in the tech business just in 2010, which to me just doesn't seem like that long ago.
No, but it is.
It's huge. It's just this huge 10-year jump of where we've really come in software and internet tools and all these things. So it's fascinating to me. You got to 4 years and then, these companies are doing it in 3 months right now.
Oh yeah. No, today is a whole new world. It's just, you have so many technologies that are out of the box, like you say, that you can replicate. AI is a new fantastic tool that you can use to move a lot faster. I mean, there are so many things faster, like say 1,000 times different.
Yeah. So you sell the product, and then I think I researched like 2017. You got some investment from Caterpillar. Is that right?
That's right.
Is that how
Caterpillar was our first kind of institutional investor. So Caterpillar, we met them in 2015, and then in 2017 they invested in Busy. So which was great. Like to me, growing up in the excavation industry, there's nobody bigger or cooler than Caterpillar. It's like the 60th.
It's like John Deere if you're a farmer.
Yeah,
right?
That's right.
Like Caterpillar if you're in construction. Yeah.
So it was fantastic. Flew out to Peoria, Illinois at that time. Where their headquarters was, and met with the kind of top brass at Caterpillar. It was just fantastic.
That's cool. And they saw it as an integration within their existing equipment. Like they wanted to integrate it into their construction. What was that relationship like?
So I kind of pitched them on the productivity data strength of, if we took their machine analytics, which they were focused on, and our labor analytics, the operators, and kind of combine them, we could provide more insights in how to be more productive and efficient, which is still the case today.
Yeah.
That's still an opportunity today.
Yeah. It's like, because the best thing that I could describe it to is hot schedules for restaurants. And blending hot schedules with your cooking inventory, right? Not only is it just the labor, but then it's like, hey, how much food do you have? How fast? What's the shelf life? What's the inventory, right? Having that all in one system. We didn't have one system when I was working in the restaurant. I imagine these days they do probably have one single system.
I think they do.
Thinking the advantage that you can, the duplication of data and just the efficiencies that you can come out of your business that way seems pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the whole goal of us getting together. So
it's somebody else's challenge now, or their opportunity. Somebody else's opportunity now.
That's correct.
You just closed on that this year, right, or last year?
Last year. So November 2023, we closed on selling the company.
Nice. So then that freed you up to do a bunch of stuff. We're sitting here looking at Tech Ridge right now, which is the other reason why I wanted to bring you on, because this is one of the coolest projects I think I've ever seen. For sure. I think there's some cool things about Black Desert and Desert Color, but it's not this. They're not this. It's completely different.
They're just different. I know Patrick Manning well at Black Desert, and I'll quote him because he said it, and I agreed. He says, my wife asked me, what's the difference between Black Desert and Tech Ridge? He says, well, I think Tech Ridge is live, work, play, and Black Desert's play.
Play. Yeah, nice.
That's pretty accurate. They're a resort.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they are. They're a resort. So
it's a resort.
It's play. And we're more of an economic focus, on high paying jobs and producing those high paying jobs for the region.
Yeah,
it's not that Black Desert doesn't produce a lot of jobs, but it's just a different focus.
Yeah, I talked to somebody who, this was back in the 90s or whatever, when he lived here, because then he left, then he came back in probably about 5 years ago. but he remembers flying and landing on the old airport and how much of a challenge in a small plane it was to land on this thing, because it can get, the crosswinds are pretty bad where the runway was. So if you don't know, Tech Ridge is sitting on what used to be the St. George Airport.
Yep.
And I know you like to take in that history as part of the development. You want to keep that thought still in people's minds. You don't want people to forget that this was an airport at one point. So it's going to be a part of its character.
Yes.
But it's a city property. So what makes it kind of unique is that the city presented, they have this big old piece of land. What do they do with it? And I think it's all the way back to 2014 or 15?
2016 is when the city first approached me and some of the others in the tech community.
Okay. And did they kind of have the idea, or did they say, hey, we're open to anything, but we'd love your thoughts? Like, how did that kind of open up?
The city wanted to create a tech center. And so they were, they were forward thinking. They said, we want to create a tech center. We want to create those kind of jobs in the economy. Excuse me. And so luckily they got some pretty good advice. They talked to a guy, like one of the older, you might say, founders, or at least someone that's been around Silicon Valley for a long time. And they said, how do we attract big technology companies to St. George? And he said, you don't. Like, you won't ever. And, of course, that's kind of like, really?
You're like, but
we want to. And he says, Microsoft is in Seattle because Bill Gates lives in Seattle. Dell Computers in Texas because Michael Dell went to the University of Austin. Anyway, he goes down the list and he's like, you look at Steve Jobs, everywhere. He's just like, they follow, they're where their founders are. Yeah. He says the best thing you can do is you find the most thriving technology companies in your region and help them thrive. Find out what you can do to help them thrive and help them grow. And the city took that advice. And so they approached myself. I'm the CEO of Busy at the time. Ryan Weedig, the CEO of Asian, Clinton Reed, CEO of Zonos, and just kind of said, hey guys, what can we do to help you? And that was really forward thinking. That was awesome on their part. And so they said, well, we'd love to see you move up to the old airport and build your buildings there and buy some lots. And one of the curses of getting in the tech world is it makes you an innovative thinker, like you overthink everything. Yeah. And so we got together and we're like, well, is that really what we want? Would that really help us? Because they were saying, and so they got us thinking. They're like, well, what will help you? Yeah. What will help you thrive? And so whenever you do, I say it's my curse now, but it's a great curse. Like, that's why Tech Ridge is unique, is because it's really innovative thinking. Yeah. So we got together and said, okay, well, how could the city help us? What are the things the city could do to solve our problems? And so we kind of zeroed in the focus and said, well, it's all about recruiting and retaining top talent. Right. Like for us, what's going to keep us in St. George? Because that's the city's goal. Like, how do we keep these technology companies that are emerging in St. George? Because a lot of times they'll leave. If a tech company is big enough, it's going to move to Lehigh for Silicon Slopes, moves, San Francisco, wherever they feel like they can thrive. And so we said, okay, well, what's our biggest challenge? And we all agreed, the biggest challenge is both retaining and recruiting top talent to the areas so that we can grow. Sometimes these companies are growing at 60, 70% year over year. How do you keep up with that? Yeah. So we said this environment needs to help us do that. Yeah. And so we kind of went down the road on an innovative project. I took the lead of that discussion because I had a background in construction and land development. And we really, brought in some professionals like out of state, like land planners and stuff, and said, okay, what can we do? And so we kind of took it as a research project, researched all the things that make a great experience, a great community that attracts people. Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to recruit and retain top talent, you're trying to create experience that makes people want to be there. Yeah. Like exciting, fun. Like today, I think I have the funnest job in the world. Like all I get to do is sit around and try to think of cool things to do to make people want to be at that project.
Yeah, to come and live here and play here, but then also have the ability to work there as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Live, play, and work, yeah.
Yes, so they have a good experience.
Yeah. So why, as they're going through, they do an RFP, right? So a request for proposal. Yep. Are you one of multiple people? Are they talking to a couple of people? How did they kind of navigate through that? Was it kind of like, hey, we're going to do this one way or another. Let's just assemble a team and just go with it. Is that kind of how it was?
No, that's how I thought it was. But first, okay. Excuse me. So at first I felt,
so you learned subcontractors and contractors at one point. And now you're like, wait, business and government. Yes. How do those things crash into each other? Because there's a learning curve there.
That was a learning curve. Yeah. That was a learning experience. So what happens when the city said, okay, we want to do this, then we created the vision of Tech Ridge, spearheaded by me, but heavily influenced by, Ryan, Clint, others in the tech community. we created the vision of what Tech Ridge needed to be, and then we kind of handed it back to the city and said, okay, this is what we need to be. And we kind of thought it was going to be a partnership. And then they said, oh, okay, we got to put this out to RFP. And at first it felt like a betrayal.
Yeah.
But it was just because I didn't understand government. Like legally, they have to. They have to put it out to RFP. That's just what they must do.
Mm-hmm.
And so the two bidders that ended up bidding on it was ourselves. I put it together a group that bid on it, and the Gardner Group, which is the second largest developer in the state of Utah.
Yeah.
And so probably the reason we won the bid is because the city, when they put together the criteria, they basically took our vision and made that the criteria, which was appropriate. Like you've got to be able to accomplish this, basically show us how you're going to bring in the technology companies, show us how you're going to create an environment that they can thrive in, so it was a lot of things that we really had the insight on. Mm-hmm. And so the Gardner Group, they're a great company. They just kind of said, here's our portfolio. Like we're awesome. Like you should pick us.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them.
Is Steve Ivory, the Ivory Homes, is he kind of like a big contributor in the Gardner Group, or is he not even a part of the Gardner Group?
I actually have no idea. I only know of the Gardner, I think Kem Gardner, his dad, and then I want to say Nathan is the son, but I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not certain.
I thought there was some connection with Ivory Homes and like that, the University of Utah and the research, but maybe I'm wrong. Anyway, that's a whole nother sidebar. Yeah. So they're a big, one of the biggest developers in the state, right?
Yep.
And so they came in.
Yep.
And do you think they were just behind the 8 ball? It's like they didn't have.
I don't think they focused on it heavily.
Okay.
They have so much going on, and it's no criticism to them. I just think they probably, I guess, respond at some level to any RFP. So I think they responded, but they didn't do like we did and address every single thing. Like we spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on just the proposal.
Yeah.
We brought in the best land planners from the nation, people from Atlanta, Washington, D.C., Phoenix, Denver, Newport, California, like all the people that had created some of the best experiential mixed-use developments in the nation. So we brought in, and because that's the one thing I'm good at, it's like bringing in the right people, And so we brought in the right people, focused on the points of the vision. Like, we basically took it like a project, like, okay, let's think through this. How are we going to achieve this? How are we going to achieve this? And so we addressed every single item. Yeah. And the city manager at the time was Gary Esplin. He'd been city manager for like 40 years, and he told the council, he said, this is the single best proposal I've seen in my 40 years of history. But it's because we really dug in, and that
you got a bunch of people that could see where it was headed, the opportunity, and then, there's a lot of clear direction. And I felt that from the first time I ever heard you talk about it, as like, you could tell you were thinking about what is it going to look like when I walk down the sidewalk of this street and this street over here. You're like, right. I can see what that experience is going to look like. I could tell from that passion. So did you start with like, where did Dixie Tech come in this timeline? Because right now up there, Dixie Tech is up there. Busy was up there. The Inn on the Cliff, right? So Cliffside Restaurant, Inn on the Cliff. But that was basically it over the last basically 5 to 10 years.
Before we came, it was like Inn on the Cliffs first, and then Dixie Tech had just barely finished their building, and so they were before us too. Okay. So Dixie Tech had made a deal with the city of St. George, and they bought their property and everything before we ever came to the table.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, which is interesting because it's a technical college, right? Yeah. So what was did that have some play in it? Was Dixie Tech along for the kind of the planning process? Did you have them in mind, or it was like, hey, they're going to operate, with this?
I'm not sure what played in their dealings with the city prior to us. I assume the city, when they wanted a tech center, they probably thought, oh yeah, that works, and so they probably put them there. But I don't know the details. It was Kelly Stevens was the president of Dixie Tech at the time, and good heck, what she achieved is amazing.
Yeah, I think it's awesome what they've done up there so far. There's still more to come, right? They're still just starting.
There is. Like they're doing amazing. So she created that foundation, and she really kind of broke the mold, which was helpful for us on the Class A level college that they built. Because you're trying to create these great experiences, and they really did a good job of setting that setting that tone, which was fantastic. And on the Cliffs, the owners there, they'd bought it like a few years prior from, I don't know, you remember what used to be Rococo's, and I don't even remember what the hotel was, but the restaurant was Rococo's. They bought it, renovated it, cleaned it up. It's really awesome place now. Everybody loves to go there.
Great hotel.
So both those preceded us. And then we got into the project, won the RFP, and the first thing we did was start creating a home for Vasion. So Ryan Weedig, CEO of Vasion's a good friend of mine, and anybody that knows Ryan knows how bold he is. And so he just was like, like there was a whole bunch of us talking about like what we're going to do. There was many others besides the ones that are there. And at the end of the day, there was like a couple that really took action, and myself, Ryan, Clint, it was just like, oh, we're going to do something.
Yeah.
And that's so important. Like it's critical that you get those first movers that just get things going.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a video of this guy dancing at an amphitheater, and he's the only one dancing, and everybody's just looking at him. But he just goes on, and for like 2 minutes, it's just him. And then all of a sudden he gets one person that like runs up and starts dancing, but kind of joking, and then starts to walk away. And then as that person walks away, 2 more people run up. So then that person turns around and stays and starts dancing with him. And then all of a sudden, this is over like 5 minutes. It's just this one guy. And all of a sudden the whole crowd, everybody's dancing and not caring what everybody's thinking. And it's just this crowd effect, right? You have to have those early adopters, those early movers into risky things, right? Because I think there's a lot of risk. But this project, from start, right? If you go back to 2016, so now we're 8 years into it, and I think, are we officially at liftoff? That's what I keep telling people. I was like, you're going to start seeing some real movement up there. Is that true? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and officially we're not 8 years into it, we're actually 6. Like 16 was like vision, and then they put the RFP in 17, and we won the RFP by the end of 17, and then kind of signed documents in the beginning of 18.
Oh, okay.
So really we're more like 6 years into it. And then in those 6 years, been working on a lot of infrastructure, Evasion's building getting built, and, getting the back access road built. And then there were a few challenges that we had to overcome. Some of that was, getting the financing mechanisms in place, the bonding in place to put the infrastructure, because the infrastructure to Tech Ridge is monstrously effective, as you can imagine. Like when you've got this mesa that's up in the air, trying to bring access roads, like it is incredible. Like the reality of Tech Ridge that a lot of people don't realize is without those roads, it's almost worthless.
Yeah.
If you don't put the roads in, you don't have the utilities. What do you do with it besides having an old airport?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the best use of it.
Yeah.
And so those roads are unbelievably expensive because you're trying to bring them up to that mesa. And so that was critical. And so that's what we finally have gotten to, has gotten past that point where we're ready to start building those roads. We've put in a lot of the infrastructure that we could on the north side, which is where we're focused on building right now. So in fact, we just finished a massive road on the backside of Dixie Tech on the west side, where we opened up 15 more commercial lots. And so that's what we're focused on right now, is building out. We've got a lot of reservations on those and a few more that are available. We're focused on building that out. Yeah.
So what we're going to see next, what we're going to see move probably in the next 12 months is on the backside of Dixie Tech. If you're looking here, this stuff that's right.
These small buildings.
Yeah,
here.
These small buildings right behind it.
Yep.
Yeah, right
that
there.
area there.
Yep. So those, and then are we going to see some stuff where I think it was once the Skyview building? Here, scroll down.
Over there, the
Brandon.
Planston building.
I think.
Yep, that one right there on the far left.
Yeah, the office space. Or I guess scroll down just a little bit more, and that's right there.
Oh yeah.
So it was once the Skyview building. I think just recently is it changing? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, it's going to be the Planston building. Planston is another one of these great companies in the area. There's a lot of these really great companies in the area that a lot of people don't realize are here. And Planston is one. Low key, just in grinding it out, killing it. Doing great things in the marketplace. And Planston's one of them. And so they're actually a really large company in St. George that's going to take over this. And so it's now going to be called the Planston building.
Planston building. And how big is that building going to be?
It's 100,000 square feet, about 80 or so thousand square feet of office, and then retail on the ground floor.
Retail on the ground. So similar to like kind of what's on the boulevard, where you have offices up or living up, some mix of either or, and then retail on the bottom. And that's kind of the idea throughout the whole project, though, right?
That's right.
It's more of a walkable community.
That's correct. Tech Ridge will be the first walkable community in St. George that's just entirely walkable, and that creates many of its own challenges, but also that's what makes it great. Yeah. You just focus. And so the retail, like on the ground floor here, you don't just randomly put retail on the ground floor of office buildings. You really focus on your retail centers. And so you make sure all the retail is collected or aggregated in those centers. So on Tech Ridge, we have 3 retail centers. We have the one on the north, which this is part of, that's the activity retail. Mm-hmm. And it'll have activity and restaurants and a lot of things. And then the one in the middle, which is like you might consider it the neighborhood services retail. Like you'll have the small grocery store, haircutting,
convenient
stuff, and of course restaurants and hotels and stuff in every one. Then on the south end, you'll have a resort retail, which is kind of like your will be your bigger name restaurants, nicer hotels, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because they'll be if you're going back to the view, the southern edge of the mesa. I think when you ran the traffic studies, I think the assumption was off I-15, you're going to get about 70% of the traffic was going to be coming off of a road that doesn't exist yet.
That's right.
Right? But ultimately, once that road is in place, people will come off I-15 up Bluff, and then they'll come up onto the ridge right there. That's
right. That is correct. That's the southeast access road. Once the southeast access road is in, which it'll probably start, it's going through engineering now. My imagination is it'll probably start construction beginning of 2025 and be done by the end of 2025.
Yeah.
That'll take roughly 65 to 75% of all future traffic. So when you're on Techie Ridge, you'll be able to hit the freeway in 3 minutes.
Yeah. See, and I think that's one of these unique things about this area. Thinking about attracting stores, commercial.
Yeah.
There's this chicken and the egg thing that happens, right? Is that somebody who wants to start a business, especially if they're an established franchise, they've done this, they want to duplicate what they've done in other areas. Starbucks, for an example, right? They know they need this many door swings to project out, and they can make the profit number work, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can't project out the traffic, it doesn't make sense to move forward with that, right? And so
that's right.
A lot of times the developers can have this great idea, but the commercial people that would take over those spaces might disagree with you as to whether that's actually that great of an idea or not. But this is so close to the freeway that you have a lot of justification, and the residences and the projected residences that'll be up there is that you can reasonably say, like, these are just going to be the people within 4 blocks and then the freeways within 3 minutes, right? So
that's right.
A lot of these commercial places are going to say, hey, this makes obvious sense, where that's not true of most of St. George commercial. Like when it comes to commercial in St. George, that's not really the typical standard.
That's right. This is a very planned commercial, planned retail. And what you're doing is you're planning for the success of the retailer. So we're keeping them in mind, like, how do they succeed? How do you bring that traffic? And like you say, it's usually figured on doors. St. George has a unique benefit of having all the tourism traffic also that retailers have to consider. But a place like this, it does. So you have the complement of the daytime office workers, the nighttime or the residents that are up there. This has 1 million plus square feet of office space at full build out and 2,400 residential units, and then 600 doors or keys of hotel. And so what that does is, as a retailer, what you want that daytime traffic, you want the nighttime traffic, and then you want visitors, tourism, as much as you can. And so that combination helps you be successful. And so that's what we focus on.
I was talking to Sharon Gillespie. She's a city councilman in Ivins. And we were talking about like the main street in Ivins, because there's one part of Center Street that is all owned by one developer. And they presented to the city a couple of different times, like what a downtown like street with retail on the bottom, office or residential above. And the last time it got presented, I think this was last year. It could have been, it was probably 23. They didn't like the plan, and it was the plan for the entire parcel. So it was like 400 doors essentially, because it's a big piece of land, and it almost seemed like that was just a huge chunk to bite off. And one of the things that she commented on was like, for these retail spaces to actually make financial sense for somebody to go into them, they have to have X amount of people coming through, right? And my thought was, like, well, is that for the city to determine if that viability is there or not? Or is it something that you got to allow the market? Because I can't help but think there's something to be said for, if you build it, they're going to come. If they don't have the option, and maybe capital to build your own is less accessible like it is right now. If you don't have the option, then you never give the possibility of somebody even trying it out. What do you think about, what if you build it and nobody takes occupancy right away? Like, is there a bad thing about that? Part of me is like, I don't know if that's a bad thing.
If they don't take occupancy on the retail or which part?
On the retail, on the commercial side.
So,
because I think the living is always going to fill up. We're going to always have people, like, whether it's a hotel or a place to live, we're never going to lose demand for that. But the commercial space has just been such a slow growth in St. George. It's almost like, is that because the city's keeping commercial from going in because they don't think it's viable, or is it,
it's a great question. Let me think of the right way to explain that. But the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the residential needs to come first. Okay. Because to get the bodies in there, like, let's say you plan for mixed use, you might want to use that retail space, let's say for temporary office space or something, because until you get the bodies in there, until you get all the residential developed in there, it's really hard for that retailer to be successful because like you say, they do need that traffic. They need that foot traffic. And so as the developer, and some cities understand this better than others, I don't have any experience with Ivans, and I've worked with St. George, and we've worked with things, and the council members in St. George have been fantastic about listening and learning, and we're kind of growing up together.
Yeah.
But when you realize that, I need to provide an environment for the retailer to be successful, because the retailer creates that vibe, that cool vibe that everybody wants to be at. And if you don't allow the development to happen around it to, basically provide for them or give them the opportunity to create that vibe, you're just not going to get a good retailer.
Yeah.
And certainly you're not going to get a successful, thriving retailer. And it's something that it's hard for cities, because you think of yourself as a council member, like any city council member, there's no prerequisite for them to have experience in like city planning or development or any sort of master plan communities. And so when they see something that comes to them, let's say it's like a 5-acre subdivision with a few houses on it or whatever, that's easy to approve. Like I've seen that a million times. But you get a big master plan, like you're saying in Ivans, like you get a big master plan, that's kind of hard to comprehend, to swallow, to understand. And yet that is exactly what you need.
Yeah.
You need those big master plan things, because they're so much more successful, because someone is thinking about it A to Z. Like if I've got a retailer here, how is that retailer going to be successful? And so I'm building that environment where when you just like build a bunch of 5-acre parcels, nobody really thought of, where the retailer is going to be and how they're going to be successful. And then you end up having additional problems, like I could tangent on this too much, but you have traffic problems. Like if you didn't build enough neighborhood convenience, needs in the area, now everybody's got to drive to somewhere else to get it. And now you've bogged up your roads.
Yeah, you're bottlenecking, right? And we can see that little valley in the fields, like coming into like groceries, just like some of the basic requirements. You end up with these huge traffic jams, right? And then Green Springs is an example of that, right? Is that if you're off Riverside Drive, or if you're right there at that Green Springs exit, man, it is. No matter what time of day, it's pretty packed in there.
Yeah.
And some of it's like, well, we got to let the rest of the market play out. But for the most part, it's mismanagement on the planning, because one person's idea, and I have this 5 acres and the guy next to me has 5 acres, but we never talk to each other, and I'm just going to do what I want with my one thing.
Yep. It's hard. And it's difficult to master plan like a community the size of Tech Ridge. It's difficult. That's part of when you talk about 6 years, is part of the 6 years is when you do a master plan that big and you're trying to help the cities, and it's city staff, it's city council, and then you have changeover in council members, and you have to kind of get everybody to understand that. And like I say, it's not like typically they have a lot of prior experience in it.
Yeah.
And so that's much harder to approve. So what does that do? It automatically motivates the 5-acre guys to just do the things that are easy to approve and turn
that they know they're going to
money.
Yep.
Yeah. Like get that property, get the highest use out, get your money. And so a master plan community, they really got to be committed for the long haul, because it can take years to just get that through planning and approval and all the pieces in place, which brings your point of like, we're ready for liftoff, right? Like now we're through all of that. We've got all the approvals that we need. Now we're just moving. We're building roads, we're building buildings, and we're like right now you will start to see the liftoff of Tech Ridge.
Yeah. It's I think there's a couple of my favorite things up there, thinking about what are the if you build like a small subdivision, you think of like the amenity, you're like checking the box, like I just want this one amenity. But when you think about this, right, and you're like, there's going to be potentially 7,000 people up here, right? Yeah. Like working, living, and playing every single day. What are they going to do?
Yep.
What can I give them to do that they're going to love and keep loving? The cool benefit, I think it's the trail system. I think that, Did you start with the trail system? It seems like you went trail and then filled in the rest. You're like, I want to make the outdoor space first, and then I'll fit whatever building I can later. Is that kind of how you did it?
We kind of did it that way. Like, we did that proposal to the city. So we proposed, when we came back to the city with our proposal, we proposed a massive amount of parks, trails, and open space. So Tech Ridge, not including Dixie Tech, but everything surrounding it's about 180 acres, and 60 acres of that is parks, trails, and open space. And 35 of those, more than half that acreage, is that rim trail. So what we're doing is we're building that trail around the rim. And it's one of those things where, like I say, I love that my job is to try to make everything cooler. We've decided lately to push that trail even more to the edge and put a rail there, so it's more exciting, a little more intense to kind of run the rim.
Yeah.
But the rim's a 5K trail. And then up the backside today, we're starting the steps. And that might seem like not that cool, but it's really cool. So you take, in the state of Utah, I think the biggest
for all the
amount of
fitness
steps.
people,
Yeah.
for all the fitness people that live in this community, and there's
Exactly.
thousands of them. The two sides on the back ridge is Brandon. See if you can go to the
I don't know if we have it, but if you go to the main plan, you can see it.
project status. So we're
Yeah,
at
it's right
techridge.com,
here.
everybody.
Yeah.
If you're looking at 180 acres of office living, let's see if we can find a map of the parks.
Yeah, I think that's going to be your best bet.
Yeah, that's probably your best
right
one.
here on this corner, where that overlook is.
So southwest.
Way. Yeah.
So just down the road, a little bit before the bend.
Yeah, a little bit to your right. Right up there on that corner, kind of by Dixie Tech, this hotel. Kind of this area here.
So Brandon, go to the left.
Yep, left.
Where the beginning of Dixie Tech is, but come to the edge of the rim.
Yeah, a little more to your next outcropping. Right there. You see that little gray line? That's steps. So that'll come. There's 352 concrete steps that go from the bottom there. So basically, Black Ridge Cove is developed down here, and the trail system will connect to the bottom.
Yeah.
Then you have 352 concrete steps with about 45 landings. And to give you an approximation of that, that's like running up 21 stories of flights, 21 flight stories, plus you have the landings in between. And I think the largest amount of steps is up in the avenues in Salt Lake City of 220 right now.
Okay.
But you have 352 steps. They'll be 12 feet wide, concrete steps. They'll have a rail in the middle that has a light underneath them, so indirect light, so it's kind of like glowing.
Yeah.
So you can do this night or day.
Yeah. Or early in the morning.
It's a massive project, and it's like $750,000 just to build these steps. But why are we doing it? Yeah, it's like...
This is like when I was talking to Patrick Manning. Is like, why would you do that? You're like, I don't know. It was fun. I don't know. I know it doesn't make sense on a piece of paper, but I promise you, people are going to love it. And I want the experience is more important to me than anything else, right? So
that's right. It ends up making economic sense, but not in the short run. In the long run, it makes economic sense. So part of it is, okay, we had to take a storm drain down there, so we scarred the mountain. We want it to look beautiful, so we're like, well, how do we cover up the scar? And so we're like brainstorming, and our goal is to make a cool place. We're like, hey, what if we did a bunch of steps up there so that instead of running the stadium steps, and President Williams at the time, he was telling me, he's like, please do that so people will stop running my stadium steps.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
But we're like, well, let's give them a place to run. And so, you'll have people that run the steps. They'll set a PR record like on Strava. And then you have people from all over the world that will compete to like beat that record. And me personally, that's like my goal for 2024. Like if by the end of 24, I can run those steps, that's going to be a high goal for me. Like I'm going to start as soon as we get built, and it's like, see how many I can run up. We're going to put like numbers every 10 steps, and I'll see how far I get before I pass out.
Like these are like the avenues. So you said the longest one in Salt Lake is 220. 220. Have you seen what's the longest one in
the world or
in the country?
Yeah, I don't know.
Now I want to look it up.
There's some. I don't know if you'll find as high quality of steps this. I know there's one like in Denver that they're like boards and then gravel. It's really? Like 1,000 steps. I mean,
okay,
But having consistency, like when you're a runner, and we've looked into this quite a bit. When you're a runner, having that consistency of the concrete, like steps to where your body kind of gets used to it, is important.
That's cool. And then it links right into the 5K, loop that's going to go around it, right? So you can combo it up. You can start with the steps, or you can finish with the steps, however you want to do it.
That's right. Right now we're going to have a loop that will start here on this west side, but you'll have a full loop going up the steps across the west side of the ridge and back down that steep trail and then circle. So you can have full loop. So that'll be done within about 3 or 4 months. Yeah, you'll see that, and it'll have lights for night and everything. It'll kind of give the flavor. So you'll see the flavor of what we're doing for the rest of the site.
Nice, cool. And what are you going to call the steps? What are they called?
We're trying to figure out an idea. Maybe you could help us. Maybe even your listeners could help us.
But let's come up with some cool ideas.
Had so far, you can't see it good here, but the best thing we've thought of so far is like the tail of the dragon, because it kind of looks like it's got like steps, and so
that's a cool idea.
We haven't for sure determined it, but
flushed
we'd love
it all
ideas.
out. Yeah, let's get some ideas rolling through here. So that's stuff that's right now. What are some of the more exciting amenities? So the pavilion up there. If you've been up on the ridge, you've probably drove past it and you're like, man, that kind of looks like a spaceship. That's for a reason. But
we want UFO sightings to be reported in the area.
One of the coolest things that I like about this, and I know it's important to a lot of St. George residents, especially ones that have been here their whole life, right? The families. There's some protection of the vistas that they really value, right? And so it's important that having a skyscraper, right, building up on a ridge, on top of a ridge, is not what they find ideal,
right?
But with some of the way we've set the way you have set up the setbacks to where even when you're on the ridge, it's set back into the center of the plateau. So it's not going to feel like there's this massive building right on the edge of the plateau, right?
That's correct.
When you drive past that pavilion, you're like, oh, that doesn't seem like that big. It actually kind of looks small. And then you like stand in the middle of it and you're like, this pavilion's huge.
Yep.
you could definitely have a whole stage and put on a whole show there. So, which I think is just such a cool, there's a little optical illusion to it. But that pavilion, you've kind of has it as centered as around like a community space, right?
Yeah. The pavilion, if you stand in the direct center of the pavilion and you look south, you're looking exactly where the old runway used to be. So we'll end up setting like an airplane monument, which we've now bought our,
cool.
or we're in the process of buying it.
Yeah.
And it's a historical one. We'll announce that later.
It's
cool. Really cool. It's like a rare find. Like
cool.
one that has actually history in the area.
Yeah.
Anyway, when you stand in the center of the pavilion, you look to the south and you're looking right down the old runway. And so we're going to have a little airplane looks like it's taken off there. And then like a memory plaque that talks about the old runway and also different experiences that were connected to it. When you look directly east from the pavilion, it's perfectly lined up with the center of the temple. And so you've got that historical connection that you're looking right on the city.
Yeah.
And anybody should do it. Go stand right in the center of the temple center of the pavilion and look right at the temple, look right south, and you'll see how we designed it.
Yeah. So you really have that thinking in place. What other, because I know there's some other things that you've kicked around. There's lots of ideas, right? Yeah. Innovative thinking. What are some of the other exciting things that you want to put up there as far as experiences goes?
Well, the trail system, for one, when we talk about a 5K surrounding the trail, like, you're used to, St. George has a lot of great trails. But we're making sure this isn't second tier to anything. Like the two main roads down on the south end, they're being bridged with pedestrian bridges. So you'll be able to like hit the trail on the exterior and run the whole system without conflicting with traffic. And it'll also be like a commuter or connection trail.
Cool.
So the trail is actually going to be one of the most exciting things. And that all gets turned over to the city of St. George. So it becomes a public amenity. Any of the public can go use it.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll also connect all the retail together. So if you live in apartments on the north side of Tech Ridge and you want to just take a walk or run or anything to, let's say, the grocery store in the center, you've got that pedestrian connection that really is pretty unique. Mm-hmm. And we're making that 12 feet wide, so it's really convenient and nice and lit at night. I'm really excited about the trail systems.
Yeah, and how it connects to all of the different parts of the ridge.
And then our goal is to connect it to downtown. So our goal is to bring that down and, run an actual pedestrian overpass over the top of Bluff Street and land on the south side of Smith's. That's not approved yet, not done. I'm just throwing it out there.
It's like these the thought process is like, how do we connect this high density community to the downtown, the historic downtown of St. George, right?
That's right. With pedestrians. So like if you hate traffic, right?
Yeah, because I think
not going to have a traffic problem.
I think everybody agrees. They're like, well, all these people, all you're going to do is create more traffic. But the idea would be, we have to start thinking walkable community. We have to start thinking of alternative ways of getting from point A to point B, and getting closer together is how we do it, at least in Washington County, because we don't have a lot of space to be able to do it. We just don't.
Well, two things are going to make Tech Ridge just amazing for traffic. And one is the walkable community, and the other is the 3-minute connection to the freeway. It's like if you're leaving somewhere else, boom, you're on the freeway in 3 minutes, you're not going to really fight through all the traffic of anywhere,
downtown or anything like that. Yeah.
And then everything's going to be walkable for you. So you're not going to be as much of a contributor to the traffic, but we want to make that connection right to downtown. So you could jump on like a scooter or a bike or whatever and hit downtown, whatever's your convenience. But personally, I love walkability.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm always trying to think of like outside of walkability, because a lot of our community doesn't have the physical ability to, right? We have a lot of retirees here, or they just are lazy and they would rather jump in the car.
Yep.
Have you thought about any, like, aside from the trail, any people mover type stuff in there? I mean, I guess when you drive up there, the cars, I think we're
making it convenient for the cars.
Yeah.
So nobody will have to totally change their habits. It's really going to be kind of an at-will thing. So we're making them kind of independent of each other. Like the cars, you'll be able to access everything, park within reasonable distances. To walk, like we're building different focused parking garages. And so you'll be able to park and walk not too far. Like anybody in the community, the elderly should be able to handle it. Mm-hmm. But then the trail system is going to be almost independent. And have you ever been to Riverwalk in San Antonio?
Oh, yeah.
So like, how you can really come in the front of all the hotels, but then you can also jump on this trail system in the back and connect to everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
That's basically the concept here. So if you want to be walkable, you're not going to have to, it's going to feel like you're in a different world. Like you don't have to compete with the traffic.
Oh, that's going to be awesome. See, and I think that's such a cool it's a it's not a compromise. It's a consensus of saying, hey, we need these things to happen, and what's the best possible outcome that we can make happen from these. You know, I think the wage growth and I think economic impact. You want to go to that one, Brandon? It's the fourth tab in. This is something that I think was the most made the most sense to me out of all of the idea, right? Because I think it's easy to get swept away with like having, you know, cool buildings and trails and you know, a different downtown feel than the current St. George downtowns, right? Is that kind of the thought process? But the economic impact I think is important. So tell me how do you envision this going, and what is it really going to mean for the community? From a dollar perspective. Thank you.
It's one of my favorite topics. It's what makes everything else make sense. Like, you know how have you ever driven down to Vegas and you're like, oh my gosh, how the hell do they afford to spend how do they afford to make this so awesome? Like Vegas, by the way, spoils you for everywhere else. Like they just make the coolest things.
Yeah.
And you wonder how they afford that. And the single answer is money. Like you have to have a massive economic impact if you want to make really cool stuff.
Right.
And so the way Tech Ridge works, all the tech companies, you know, like I'll use Busy as an example, but all the others up there, they're basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. Think of it like import-export of dollars. Like, you know, Busy is selling to all over the country. We had 80,000 users, like 4,000 paying companies across the US, Canada, Australia. And so you're basically bringing dollars in from other places into St. George. And then you're feeding them back out into the economy by paying your payroll. And so you pay these high-paying jobs, these high-paying wages. And people working there on Tech Ridge, you know, for these different companies, it's importing money from outside, and then they're taking that money and they're putting it into the community, whether they're buying things or getting their car repaired or whatever the case is, going to lunch, you name it, right? And then that money cycles within the community because then they spend that money in the community, and the people that are working at the restaurant, they spend money somewhere else, and so that cycles. And so what you end up getting is about an 8x benefit. Wow. So you take the amount of payroll, like the average person on Tech Ridge makes, let's say, $100,000, which is probably about right. So that has an annual economic benefit of $800,000 per employee. And that, if you scroll down a little bit, that's how you come to some of these numbers where it's like, that's the one-time, scroll a little bit more, that's the one-time impact for
construction.
And and this is the long-term impacts. This is the recurring impact, which is real important, is it produces about 6,000 direct jobs, which spurs another 10,000 indirect jobs. And that produces an annual labor of about $1 billion. And the indirect jobs are part of that 8x impact. And so the direct jobs have about 8 times impact. And that ends up coming out to an economic impact of just about $3.2 billion annually, which is unbelievably massive.
That's huge.
But I want to start with the way that works, because a lot of people are like, well, how does that work? That's how it works, is you're bringing outside money in, and then it's getting fed into the community, buying houses, you name it. I mean, it's just, and it creates that economic activity and kind of energizes it.
Yeah, Clint Reed and I talked about it when I had him on the episode. We talked a little bit about that, about how, you know, you're selling a product outside of our community, right? Yep. It's not serving specifically our community, but it's employing people that then now have money that they can put in where they live, right? Yep. And thinking about how Microsoft changed Seattle, like it literally changed the complete demographic, everything about Seattle was changed because of just one company, Microsoft, right? Yeah. And it's interesting because I had Gary Henderson, who used to work for Microsoft back in the day. He lived in Seattle. And then Devin McDonald, they both live here now.
Oh, cool.
But they grew up and lived in Seattle like pre-Microsoft. And then now they're here, and they saw what it did to their community. And, you know, over that long tier, it really does adapt and change the community. And so when we think about what is it that the future of Southern Utah, what do we want it to maintain? I think all of us want to maintain outdoor space.
Yep.
Which means being conscious about what we build, because once we got it, that's what we get, right?
Yep.
The redevelopment's really expensive. And if it's just retirement and vacation homes, right? Like if that's all we're ever going to be, it's going to be very difficult to maintain the current trajectory where we're at, right? It's just going to be really difficult.
I love your word maintain, because that connects me back to like something I forgot in the conversation of the city's vision. The number one thing everybody wanted to maintain was their kids.
Yeah.
Like they wanted, like, why do you want high paying jobs in the area? Well, it's like, I want my kids to not have to move away from me, my kids and my grandkids. Like, And everybody had a consensus on that. Like when the city council first approached us, the mayor, the city manager, everybody, that was the consensus. Like we're known for exporting our talented youth. We don't want to export them anymore. We want to create opportunities here local, and we want to maintain the relationship with our kids. And so when, some people are like, well, is that a change to St. George? Yeah. In some ways it's a positive change because you have a lot of youth that are saying, okay, I don't know if I've got an opportunity here that meets the threshold of what I'd like to have. And so they go elsewhere to find it.
Yeah.
And that was one of the primary tasks when we say recruit and retain top talent. The city, because of their constituents, retain was the big one. They're like, we want to be able to, our students graduating from Utah Tech, our kids in the area, we want to be able to maintain them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to have entry-level jobs that are service industry jobs like restaurants and working at the car wash and all those things. But, if your primary economic driver of the county right now is the number one employer is Walmart, and then the next four are either the school district or an actual city, like the government employee, that's not the best mix. That's not the best economic mix for a community to maintain stuff that we want here that's fun and exciting and keeping people here. And even I think you and I both talked about how a lot of the retirees, not all of them, but most of the retirees see like, hey, we got to have progress in some ways, because if we don't, roads don't get fixed. We don't, we can't solve infrastructure problems, later on down the road because we don't have tax base, right? We don't want property taxes to go up crazy. It's part of why people came here to begin with. Because if you can't raise money and taxes through, tourism and sales, then you got to raise property taxes, right? And so it's just funny I want both things. A lot of people in the community want both things, but it's just not going to happen.
That's right. And for me, when I've met with people and they understand it, they end up liking it. Yeah. Like Tech Ridge, we will pay at full build out. Our tax value, what we pay the school district and everybody is 8 times the average.
Wow.
Because of the density and the kind of community we're creating, it's 8 times the average. And so it ends up being like also a very strong generator of tax revenue to offset some of those things, like you're saying, to offset housing, because housing really doesn't generate a lot of income. It's more of a cost.
Yeah, it's more of a cost. I think I talked to Mayor Randall about that. And then, the economic Darren Prince, him and I were talking about how it's like, no, you build a house, it costs the government money. It costs the city. It costs the community money. It's not adding value to what services and things are provided. It's costing more, right? So to pay for fire, to pay for police, to pay for maintenance and all these things, you got to have businesses and employers, right?
That's right.
And this is going to bring a diversity employer to the community that we haven't had historically, right?
That's right. And keep the ones that we have here. We have some really great ones here.
Yeah.
But they need a place to thrive.
They do, yeah. And I talked a little bit to Clint about that, but even Intergalactic, right? Mm-hmm. Even, this balance between like, hey, we had this vision 2016, 6 years ago, like their businesses are moving and they're like, hey, we got to get moving. We got to get moving because we need to grow. We have all these opportunities to grow. We got to do it. Yep. And so we don't want to lose those opportunities. So now's the time to have it, kick off. So that's exciting. I think that's exciting. Yeah. What other the economic impacts? Maybe anything else we needed to touch on?
I guess if you scroll back up, there's the one-time construction impact. That it's also a massive construction project. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So $2.3 billion construction project with $1 billion of that going into labor income. So that produces a lot of construction jobs too. And I know in the last few years.
So that's 1.2 billion, 1.02 billion labor income?
Yeah, it's not 102 billion.
Okay. Just a little typo.
Little typo. We need a decimal point
that's
there.
All right. Hey, Brad, if you're listening. No, just kidding.
I didn't even think of that till you said it because I'm so used to
knowing you just know the numbers, man. You know the numbers.
But in the construction community, for the last few years, everybody's been busy. And so it can seem like, we don't need more construction jobs. But busy doesn't last forever. And it's right. We're already hitting some of those cycles that it's getting harder and harder to find work. And Tech Ridge is a 15 to 20 year project. So it creates a consistency of construction employment in the city for the next good little while, which is a great thing.
Yeah, it is a good thing. And that I think that's the cool thing about having Tech Ridge, Desert Color, Black Desert. Yeah. They're all three very different, but they're also economic drivers and stability in the construction, which historically has been basically 30 to 40% of our economic mixtures coming from some kind of construction, whether it's road construction, residential real estate, or commercial or whatever. It's like 30 to 40% at least historically.
That's right. And it's been heavy residential construction, and that's slowing down massively.
Yeah, it absolutely has. Absolutely has. Which to some people, they're happy about that. They're like, good, there's less people here. However, that's not going to last forever. It's going to be, this is like a temporary reprieve in my mind before it's just going to kick back off again. And people, I was joking on the other episode that we did, but this was just yesterday when I recorded the housing market update about how it's collecting license plate. Is like historically on a weekend open house, especially this time of year, I get a lot of people from northern Utah. They're like here visiting and thinking about buying a second home or moving down here. Man, it was 2 from Colorado, 2 from Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, and 2 from Montana. And This was like before noon on a Saturday morning.
That's amazing.
All over the place. And now they all were West Coast, but I even have several leads coming from Florida where, they moved to Florida, during, COVID, 2020, 2021, and the humidity, they can handle it. It's like, somebody described it as like suffocating, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And so they're like, we want to still stay warm, but we want to stay Republican or conservative, right? Whatever that is. So they're looking at all these different areas, right? And so it's just funny. We have people coming from all over the world now.
I was thinking about that too. And I have no desire to jump into politics, but I was going to say a lot of them, because I've hired a lot of them busy. They're like, some of them like I didn't hire her, but one lady I'm thinking of, she's from Pasco, Washington. I'm familiar with Pasco, Washington, which is rare. Like not everybody.
I have no idea.
It's like a small town. It's kind of like St. George, but they even, some people call it Little Utah because there's like a heavy LDS community there.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it's quite a bit east of Seattle, so it's like inland quite a bit.
Okay.
And they're very conservative, very Republican. Very very identical principles to people in Washington County.
Yeah.
And she said, I just couldn't stand anymore this mom that I was talking to, because I bought our conference table in my office. I bought it off her as like her kitchen table.
Nice. Sweet.
Anyway, she was, and because I was like, Pasco, Washington, I've been there, I know it's a unique community, because when I was working for Busy, I went and met with a Caterpillar dealer up there. Anyway, she says, we were just sick of Seattle dominating the state politics.
Yeah.
And so she's just basically saying, like, we don't have a big enough voice in Pasco to have any sort of impact. And so what comes out of Seattle dictates like our schools and everything else. And so therefore she was looking at Washington County as like, hey, where's somewhere that I can go that has more principles that are identical to the ones that I hold to? And that's what brought her here. And I've met a ton of people like that, and others that we've hired within Busy that were like that,
Yeah. Well, and I think this is that opportunity for us to, if we want to, I don't know, this, not to say that I'm just going to say it.
Yeah.
If we want to grow up as a city and we want to have a better diversity of demographic that kind of keeps us stable through economic ups and downs, it's not just a retirement community. It's not just a resort community. This is an opportunity where families are wanting to move here. We got to give opportunities for them to get here. Affordability is a challenge, but jobs solves a lot of the affordability challenges, right? Because wages will come up. It's a lag behind everything else. But patience in allowing wages to come up. The federal government always it makes some forced minimum wage, but businesses will eventually pay what they need to attract the talent that they need. And so we got to give them places like Tech Ridge to set up shop.
And even the high density like on Tech Ridge, it does create affordable living.
Yeah, it does.
It's if you want affordable living, sometimes you just have to live in a smaller space because you have a cost per square foot on whatever you build.
Yeah.
And there's a trend towards a lot of that. And honestly, like outside of the area, I know I've watched some of the Facebook conversations, and I know not everybody thinks this, but there's a lot of conservative Republicans that don't mind living in high density.
Yeah.
I mean, not only don't mind, but they prefer it.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to have a single family resident to have conservative values. You might have conservative values and want to live in a dense area that's highly amenitized because that's what you're used to.
Yeah.
From where you're coming, or that's what you like.
Yeah. This couple from Colorado, they had 5 acres in Colorado, but because of some of the mandates and not being able to assemble and all that for several years, a lot of that population has just kind of isolated themselves. And they said when in coming here, they want to be close to know their neighbors. They're like, I want to be able to go over and talk to my neighbor. I don't want to be isolated anymore. I want to take in retirement, which is just such the opposite, I think, of what the typical thought is you want to get into retirement and then have privacy. These guys were like, no, I want to be able to walk downtown. I want to go to shops. I want to talk to my neighbors, have a church community or, some type of community that I can plug into and have, real relationships with. And so, which is just right to your point. There's a shift in mentality, I think, for a lot of people, and we could provide it with Tech Ridge, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And I have good friends. I'm smiling because I'm thinking of good friends I know that just retired. And at least what I can see, and it makes sense for what I would do too if I were them, is like, it's like you want to be isolated for, like, that sounds good initially. And then after you spend a few weeks or months or, let's say a year, then you're done with it. Yeah. You're like, I need to see people. Like, I need to be around people, and I need to do things and connect with people. And
yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, but I'm excited about Tech Ridge. I appreciate you coming on the show, man. I think this is going to be enlightening to a lot of people that don't know a whole lot about it, but at least get it from the visionary himself. So I'm really appreciative of you coming on here and supporting us and what we're doing with the podcast and everything. So, yeah, man, good luck. And
thank you.
We're going to keep following along. I can't wait for the airplane reveal. That'll be good.
Yeah, that's going to be exciting.
But yeah, there's I know there's a possible zip line. That's another thing that I'm like, that'll be cool too. That'd be awesome. But
yeah, we're trying to create some things to do, like fun things to do. We have a whole adventure park that we've envisioned, but it's not approved. It's just something that we're thinking about.
Trying to work on some plus ones. So last thing before everybody clicks off, drop in the comments a name for 320 stairs.
352 stairs.
352 stairs.
I should do the same thing I did with my team. So how we named Cloud Drive is I put it on my team in Slack, and I said, "Hey, best name gets $100."
Nice, sweet. So, best name wins. Drop it in the comments.
Best name's $100.
Okay,
if it's used.
If we pick yours,
if it's good enough. It can't be just the best in the comments. It's got to be good enough.
To use it. Got to be good enough to use it. But thanks for coming on, man. We'll see you later.
All right, thank you. Take care.